Hey guys, I am Ibigandscary and I'm bringing you a new StarCraft 2 replay. This time it is a Zerg versus Zerg on Daybreak. Blue Zerg, bottom left corner is Nuclear. Top right is Blackgentoo. I'm going to go by Black, I suppose. Top red. Both players are, I believe, middle diamonds. And I believe Nuclear is the one who posted this on Reddit. Supposed to be a good length and a good time had by all. Daybreak, interesting map. You've got a medium ramp leading down to the natural, which is pretty much right on your doorstep. Kind of a wide gap, easily exploitable, especially by the Zerg, leading into your natural. And there's also kind of that cubby where you can sneak a unit around and then get behind the mineral lines in pretty much no time. It's a bear to hold off Hellions or a Zergling run by there. It's better to hold them off here at the choke with the destructible debris. However, you do open up the back way, which is leading down to the third, depending on which way the players want to colonize this map. You can head down to the third, or you can head over on the left side. This usually ends up being the fourth in favor of the much more exposed one here, which sits by the Zelnaga Tower. It is a Zerg versus Zerg, though, so it's probably going to come down to micro more than anything else. Who blinks first, who gets too many Zerglings. We see the spawn pools both going down comparable times, and both players are grabbing their first gas. Undoubtedly, they're going to mine just enough gas so they can get that early Zerg speed to exploit the large size of the map, allowing them to close quickly on the other player's base. Pretty standard opening so far, as both overlords scouting around, make sure that there's nothing crazy going on. You've got two pairs on either side. I've always wondered why overlords don't bother ramming the other one just to give them, in a position that they don't want to be in. But they're pacifists. It's okay. To each his own. Both players saving up quite a bit of money for their first queens. It always surprises me when they grab the queens instead of the early hatches, but the added larva early on can really come in handy, especially with the queen's ability to fend off any early aggression by one player or another. Speaking of aggression, you do have the first batch of Zerglings on the way, as Nuclear seems to be the first one to grab speed. Black decides to throw down his hatch first. We'll probably see Nuclear grab his hatch in no time at all. Here comes the drone, and it throws down that hatch. This Zergling just scouting around behind the min line to make sure that there are no hidden drones or even some Zerglings back there. That sort of aggression can be incredibly easy to check for, but it can also be very troublesome and dangerous. Spawn crawler being built up in the main for Black. He's probably going to transfer it down once this hatchery pops. But we see a Baneling nest coming down in Nuclear's base. So he's just going to keep mining that gas, saving up the gas for the Banelings later on. You can see that Black pulled his drones off his gas once he got the required 100 for the metabolic boost for the Zergling movement. Small little exchange here, 4 versus 4. It looks like Nuclear came out the winner by just a single Zergling. Not earth-shattering by any amount, but if there's one matchup that really can punish you for losing one unit, it is ZVZ. Once the speeds kick in, which it will, we should see the harassment step up. Both players seem to be getting into position to colonize their main expansion. Black's transferring down his pros at pretty much the exact same time Nuclear is. Nuclear did not build that spine crawler in favor of getting the Baneling nest. He probably will throw one down or morph in a couple of Banelings, and as I say that, he decides to morph in 2 Banelings. A very good idea to use the one that's already weakened, because in all honesty, that Baneling's not going to need a lot of hit points to deal some devastating damage, and with 2 of them on the way, Black knows that he needs to be very careful with just this handful of Zerglings, because they'll go down to a single hit from that Baneling. He gets back on gas, throws down his own Baneling nest because he realizes that it's a pretty good idea. One player has Banelings, one player does not, then the one that does not loses. Unless he decides to go for roaches. Usually you see one player go for Banelings, one player goes for roaches. and it winds up to see who can pour the most into their harassment and avoid the roach army. But with this kind of mirror matchup, both players getting Zerglings, both players getting Banelings, it'll make for a more interesting game, which personally I'm in favor of. Personally, Zerglings, 2 of them just coming in, poking around, see the saturation is pretty good on the natural, and barely makes it up into the main, sees that the evolution chamber's coming down, doesn't quite see the Baneling nest, but he saw the Banelings, so he knows that's there. Heads off a drone down here to prevent Black from picking up a third, even though he's got the money. Nuclear's got the money too, but I think he knows how precarious the situation is right now. If he tries to go for a greedy third, he's probably not going to be able to keep it up. Black opts to go for some roaches, get them on the way. If this game progresses, then we'll definitely see roaches from both sides. We'll definitely see some infestors, but it's always a good idea to get that first roach warren up and go for lair, because some of the upgrades that are afforded can take quite a while, cost quite a bit. Nuclear's got a drone in position. Looks like he's going to get ready to grab that third once he's got the money. Just cleared the 300 mark. Scouting around first to make sure that there's nothing crazy on the way. 2 Zerglings is it. Should be able to fend that off and protect that hatchery, no problem. Almost the exact same time Black threw down his. It looks like each player is trying to deny that third, because really it's a economic lead to have a third up over an opponent, but it's even better to be able to destroy an enemy's hatchery. Some Banelings come in, take out plenty of Zerglings at the same time. These come up here. I don't think there's enough Zerglings to stop these Zerglings from taking down that hatch, especially with Nuclear pulling them away like that, but Black decides to deal with them, basically buying the hatchery enough time for more Zerglings to rush in. It'd be interesting to see if Black had committed to that attack, if that hatchery would have gone down. As things stand now, both hatcheries taking a little bit, but will continue to heal or be built respectively, and that's the end of that. We see roach speed coming up, as well as both players getting their level 1 ranged. Level 1 armor is also on the way for Black. Actually, I think that just finished. Or was that Nuclear? Oh, yep, it was Nuclear. Okay. Does Black have level 1 armor? He does not. So Nuclear already has the advantage in upgrades, which you come into these battles with comparable forces. The ones with upgrades always wins. We see the infestor fits are both being finished. Both players being mindful of the amount of gas they have to harvest from. We can see on the mini map that 5 gas for Black and 5 gas for Nuclear have been grabbed so far. They'll start baking that gas for when they get up to Broodlords. Maybe they'll want to play heavily into their infestors. You got the pathogen glands coming up for Black. Infestors are heavy gas, as well as any air unit that either player wants to get, but I don't see any spires, so hopefully we'll see many infestors, which is a good time. It's a good time. Level 2 armor, level 2 attack. Just looks like each player is favoring one style of attack over the other. Zergling manages to rush in, sees that there's 2 evolution chambers going to work, sees the infestor pit, knows that he doesn't really have a leg up on that style of attack. But right now, both armies seem to be neck and neck. We do see that Nuclear has 64 drones to the 71 of Black. He needs to do some economic damage, either force Black to stay off of mainlining drones by adding some pressure, or more likely get some Zerglings into a probe line and actually physically cut down those numbers. Losing these handful of roaches isn't the biggest deal in the world, but again, with Black up to 82 over 64, it looks like Nuclear is falling farther and farther behind. 11 drones on the way though, and an infestor. That might be enough to afford Nuclear a little bit more breathing room as his upgrades all tick down to finish. Black has a smaller army but a higher economic lead, so if and when he decides to start mainlining units, he'll be able to punish Nuclear if he can maintain his lead. We see some Zerglings running in for a run by, but a really well-timed fungal growth knocks down all of them into critical health. With their health, that queen, they'll be able to take down the infestor, but nothing else as these roaches rush in. At the same time, we have Nuclear poking down here on the 5th, but we see that Black's decided to take the more exposed area for his 4th. It's closer, so he'll be able to reinforce it quicker, but it is also very exposed from several different avenues of attack. And with those slow moving roaches, you only need a couple of seconds for them to do enough damage to take it down. Nuclear decides to come up here in the top left. It's more enclosed, but it's also farther away from the bases, basically the opposite of what Black did. Again, we can see just because they're playing identical races doesn't mean that they're playing, the game the exact same way. See the difference in upgrades, 1-2 to 2-1. It just seems like Nuclear's playing it a little bit safer, a little bit more passive than Black, even though Black does have the lead. 2 great fungal growths go down on the roaches. You can just see their health get decimated by that attack, leaving these infestors exposed. Roaches push in, deal some heavy damage, take out 3 of those infestors, and now Black's only got 1 left to Nuclear's 4. Those fungal growths can really come down to just a couple of seconds timing, and 1 or 2 well-placed ones can take down a whole bundle of Zerglings and also cripple the roaches with their inability to move. You can cut an army in half. It was a really good timing by Nuclear. This is a bad attack angle for Blackington because he wants to use his superior numbers to punish Nuclear, but Nuclear's content to just rush away, take out any Zerglings and any roaches that push up for fast, and then back out before the rest of the force comes down. Unfortunately for Nuclear, he's left all these infestors exposed. 3 of them go down, 2 of them go down, and the other 2 decide to burrow and escape barely. Nuclear is morphing in an Overseer. I do not see on the production tab one coming up for Blackington. I don't think he has one. It could be something that Nuclear decides to take advantage of later. We also see Nuclear getting a Spire in his main. It could be a tech switch to air units, heavy air units, or it could be a tech switch to mutas just for some harassment, because right now Nuclear hasn't been able to do a lot of harassment. When a major fungal goes down on this army, if he can keep these pinned with just 1 more fungal, we'll see all of them go down, and that is just absolutely devastating for that force. We can see the 150 supply. They were maxed a short time ago. That is a major hit, but again, Blackington, he's got a very good sized lead on the drones, 10 drones up over Nuclear, so he'll be able to replace his units quicker. But again, it's only a handful of drones, and if Nuclear continues to get those fungal growths, we'll see. Doesn't really matter how many drones Blackington has. If he keeps losing roaches like that, he'll be in a bad position. Spire's just about to finish up as the hive finishes up for Blackington. We might see higher tiered units out of both. I was promised that by the video description, but you know how those things go. Those video descriptions, they lie constantly. But I believe Nuclear's never steered me wrong, so I'm hoping for some heavy air. And at the same time, I could have just looked at the production tab and see that you have a Greater Spire coming up and a Ultralisk Cavern. Both of their mains have such a heavy concentration of these tech structures that this 4 infestor hit squad could really just decimate all their tech structures instead of going for this probe line. It's a really good idea to take out that probe line with all these infested Terrans, and it's going to definitely do a lot of damage, but those tech structures are definitely something that you want to hit if you can. Taking out these probes, though, does a great deal. Finally balancing out those numbers. Actually, Nuclear's coming into the lead as these infestors get into position to maybe deal some damage to those tech structures. Unfortunately, they've been kind of lowered their energy count, so they're not going to be able to do too much damage up here. You can see some spore crawlers coming up into the main to provide some detection. Some of these could morph into some Overseers. It appears that 4 infestors are spitting out 4 infested Terrans. They'll do a little bit of damage, but this queen should be able to distract them long enough that they won't take down that Ultralisk Cavern. But again, they might. They do succeed in taking down that queen, though. So 2 spores, 3 spine crawlers. it's a bit of an overreaction to the amount, but he's definitely got the money. Both players definitely have the money, as we see 3K floating for Black and 5K for Nuclear. Nuclear seems to be content with the amount of roaches he has. That is an awful lot of supply. Definitely want to get rid of that so you can pour it into something more, as we see 2 ultras are on the way. This roach army is going to be able to absolutely crush this expansion because the Blackington's main force is back up dealing with that harassment by those infested Terran. These infestors come in, pop off a couple more infested Terran. They're going to finish off that Ultralisk cavern as long as they're not distracted by the defensive buildings. Hopefully Nuclear has the presence of mind to focus it down, and he does, which is a major win for him because Ultras could really wreak some havoc on that roach army. Some drones being transferred down to the new expansion that Blackington's taking in the bottom right corner, and at the same time Nuclear has grabbed the expansion that Blackington opted for early on. Even though it is a matchup, we can see that level 1 air is on the way as a Broodlord's beginning to be morphed. Blackington's been set back a little bit, has to rebuild that Ultralisk cavern. Does he do it in the same spot? He does not. He does not. I'm not 100% sure where he threw it down. There it is, down at the 3rd. A good idea to start spreading them out. Makes it so that you can lose one area, but it's not as punishing as losing them all. Especially with the Broodlords being started, we're going to see a very mobile air army be able to attack areas and do some major destruction because of that. Roaches come in, again going to take out this hatchery, forcing the cancel, which is a good move by Blackington. But, those roaches get caught by a fungal growth, not being able to retreat from a bad engagement, which is Blackington's major force. At the same time, we can see that the bottom right corner of that hatchery has gone down. So Blackington's down 2 bases now. Even though his army is a little bit more scary, now he's on the other foot because he's lost that economic edge, never really regaining it from that excellent harass by the infestors. 66 probes to 50, and Nuclear hasn't lost a single base in quite a while, which is really to his favor. You can see 4 Broodlords and 5 Corruptors are on the way. This air force is just going to get more and more devastating, especially as Nuclear loses his roaches to clear up some supply. Blackington is really devoting heavily to his roach, Ultralisk, and infestor army. However, that's not a lot of anti-air. Basically, you just have those fungal growths. He's going to have a very hard time dealing with these Corruptors. But 4 Broodlords is not enough. He doesn't want to expose them right now, but he doesn't really have a choice as Blackington decides to take the fight to Nuclear's base. At the same time, you can see he's taken both of those bases back, which is a really good play, good presence of mind. Excellent fungals going down on this force. You can see that all of them are pretty much in the red, but these infestors are all out of gas. No more energy to throw anything down. These Broodlords are pretty much going to be untouched because the infestors that Blackington brought to the fight have wasted all their energy on fungals also. They're going to push this back. They kept the hatchery up pretty much untouched, which is a major win for Nuclear. Even though he lost quite a bit, he's back to max supply. Blackington is forced to wait as 16 infestors get built. And he throws down his own spire. Not having a spire in this situation is really killer because a couple Corruptors would be able to answer back and take out these Broodlords. But right now, Blackington's forced to build 16 infestors and pray that he's got enough fungal growths to take out those Broodlords in the air. It's quite a lot of money. A couple roaches rush in, take out this hatchery down to half health. At the same time, Nuclear's main force comes in and is taking out that 5th. Blackington really doesn't have an answer for this main force until those infestors decide to pop, and we can just see that 16 of them just did. Each one of these have that pathogen gland, so they have enough to do a fungal growth, but they really need to rush down here and help, as this excellent concave really punishes Blackington's main force. These infestors come in, fungal growth, throw out a bunch of infested Terran. They're going to take down all of those Broodlords and finally push Nuclear back. But you can see the supply, 136 to 170. 21 roaches and 9 more Broodlords are on the way for Nuclear. He's going to get remaxed in no time at all because Blackington's really been suffering from economic withdrawal. Nuclear's ability to macro is really keeping him ahead of the game. He's got quite a lot of corruptors floating around, not having to deal with anything at all because that Spire just finished and Blackington isn't creating any of them. Just a couple of roaches on the way for a nuclear to tide off this. It looks like he's going to lose this base, but he had only a handful of drones mining from there because he has so many more bases to mine from. However, they're beginning to get mined out. Eventually he'll have to retake that if he can squash this army and then take out this hatchery one more time with these roaches that are buried. He'll definitely be in a good place, but this is an awfully scary force fielded by Blackington. A lot of those fungals, those infestors are out of energy for their fungals right now, and they seem to be getting picked off. The handful of infested Terrans that they can afford to spill out isn't going to be enough anti-air. He needs to get 7 more infestors, but again, I think getting out just a handful of corruptors would be able to force nuclear into being in more of a defensive position. 4 roaches down here might succeed in taking out the hatchery if it wasn't for all of these roaches, but that's some great harass done by nuclear, especially by burrowing. Basically, do you stick around with your main army forcing it to wait for these roaches, or do you morph in an overseer and punish them? Blackington decides to retreat with the remaining drones and army, leaving this hatchery to die. At the same time, Blackington decides to move in with his armada of broodlords. Blackington never really succeeded in taking back this expand. Maybe he's thinking about popping up here. Maybe just content to mine off of the small amount that he has left. You can see that the drone count's 37 to 44 as both players begins to phase out those drones. You remember how much minerals they were floating a short time ago. Now they're down to 100, 200. As they both begin to suffer from not being able to mine fully. These infestors could fungal right here. He knows that they're there, but he's afraid to lose all of the energy because he needs to spend it on these guys right here. You can see some fungal growth goes down on some of the broodlords as they spit out many infested Terran. Hopefully that's going to be enough anti-air to answer back, but you can see the supply 70 over 172, so those roaches fall very quickly. Blackington decides to leave without GGing. I admit he's probably very frustrated. He played a very good game. Nuclear played a better game, only by a couple of drones. I'm sure did he win that. That infestor harass was suitably epic. Especially down here by taking out those drones and then moving up here and just not even multi-prong but different timing. I enjoyed it. Thank you very much for posting this. Let me know what you think. I am big and scary. That's it for me. Bye.